So we're glad you joined us for this breakout session about high engagement cultures in a virtual environment. With me today is my partner, Jim Ware, our founder of Focus Consulting. And so he and I are going to take you through some dialogue and discussion about high engagement cultures using a virtual environment. So you'll notice the pictures on the screen there. You've got Jim before virtual and after virtual, and me before and after, and I kind of look the same. Now, recognize that that probably should be before COVID and after COVID rather than virtual. And the reason I say that is Focus Consulting has been a virtual environment since Jim founded us over 20 years ago. So we're extraordinarily familiar with this subject because we have a high engagement culture in our organization. And also, we've been doing this for a long time. So I'm delighted this afternoon to share some stories with you. We're going to share some data with you about virtual environments and engagement. And we're going to let you know that, everybody responds differently to being virtual or to being sort of stuck in the house, so to speak. And you'll notice Jim grew a beard and got himself a dog. Actually, he had the dog prior, just so you know, but he did grow the beard. I've had a beard for 8 years, so nothing new for me. And I am right now officially laying claim to the fact that I started the whole beard phenomenon 8 years ago, and everybody copied me. That's how narcissistic I am. So let's go ahead and dive in, talk a little bit about our subject, and take a look at where we're headed. So we really want to share 3 big ideas with you this afternoon. And we're going to give you the opportunity to spend time with each other in breakout groups so you can talk about some of these ideas and what's going on in your firms. The first thing is we want to give you some disturbing information about engagement, not to scare you, but simply as a wake-up call to recognize that engagement starts with every single manager. Engagement starts in what I would like to call the little family that we all go to work for every single day. We all go to work with every single day. So we're going to talk about that, and we'll give you some stats around that. We want to talk to you about the factors of engagement, because there are some key things that all leaders should be paying attention to around how do you solve this puzzle, whether you're virtual or not. But it's even more important when you're virtual at getting at some of these engagement factors. So we're going to spend time with you talking about some of those. And then we'll wrap up the afternoon with high engagement cultures and give you our thinking and sort of our roadmap for cultural success in combining, addressing the disturbing information, but then also combining some of these key engagement factors using a little tool we like to call Maslow's hierarchy. So we'll share that with you as well. We've been talking about this subject a lot lately, as you might guess, with a lot of clients literally all over the world. So not only are we stuck in the homes in our US, but we're also stuck in the homes in Australia, in Asia, in Europe, you name it. People are all dealing with some of the same issues. So how do we keep people engaged, and how do we keep them focused?
Hey, Keith, now that we have everybody, at least we think we have most people on board, let me just go over a couple ways that we've found make these virtual meetings more useful, more enjoyable. First off, please do chat in your thoughts as you come up with them during the session. And we love to see that sort of running commentary of what people are thinking about. If you have a question, for sure, chat it in. If you want to make a comment at any point, just use the bottom left. You'll see it in your participants. You'll see a little bottom left hand you can raise. So you can put up your hand, or you could do it actually instead of virtually. We do call on people, so please don't be worried about that. You have to have some brilliant insight. We just have found that's a better way to get participation and to hear what people are thinking about. So if we call on you and you don't have a thought, that's fine. You can just say pass, but that's a way that we try to keep it engaging and hear what you're thinking about. So those few sort of pointers are what we'll be thinking about. And Keith, did I miss any, or is that our basic approach?
No, I appreciate you jumping in on process. I'm usually the process guy, so we've just reversed our roles here a little bit. You got to be adaptable in a virtual environment by all means. So thanks, Jim. Appreciate that.
Yep.
So let's jump ahead here and take a look at some statistics that when Gallup put their survey out recently about engagement factors, they really started looking at things that created levels of engagement. And what's really interesting about this is we're going to come back to these as we go through this conversation over the next hour and a half or so. But I like the top one in particular because we are foundationally built. One of our core values at Focus is feedback. And we know it's one of our core values, one, because we appreciate the fact that it allows us to develop and grow as an organization. But more importantly, it really helps us connect with each other and build trust. So feedback, someone has talked to that person about their progress, increases engagement. And that's something that I think is very important when you talk about the next one, which is development. So feedback, by the way, doesn't always have to be developmental. Sometimes it can just be an appreciation. As a matter of fact, appreciation is really sort of what gives us lift as an organization. And unfortunately, in our industry, we are ADD, meaning we have appreciation deficit disorder. We're very much, what have you done for me lately kind of world that we live in here in the investment wealth management world. And we find that this is such a great free option. We just don't take advantage of it nearly as much as we could. So think of this formula, 5-to-1. If you could do 5-to-1, in other words, 5 appreciations for every 1 criticism or constructive bit of feedback, your organization will be highly engaged and humming along. It's so simple, but we just don't do it. You'll notice that there's a theme running throughout these. Some of the theme is about opportunities to grow and to learn. Feedback is one of those opportunities, as are giving people the chance to grow and to do something different through different assignments and so on and so forth. So you see, you've got these factors, and my understanding is you'll get a copy of all these slides, so don't worry about taking notes furiously. I'm just curious what the experience is in some of these organizations around these factors. And I see a friend of mine out there, and she's probably going to be irritated with me for identifying her, but Becca, so Jim said we're going to call on you, and I know your firm has high engagement. What are 1 or 2 of these things that you could share with your colleagues here that you guys do well at Altair around engagement?
So I think that I have very clearly identified and engaged sort of their managers with them on their journey, both from a learning and development perspective. I've empowered their managers to sort of say, each of your people, move them along a path, like either at Altair, or maybe if Altair isn't the right place, move them, help them go somewhere that is the right place. And so I think they hear from their manager a lot. They know who to go to. And I really sort of communicate with that group to communicate with each of them. And I think that's been a really helpful strategy. I think we do a lot to help, especially people who aren't working with clients, feel engaged in what we do with our clients. So we have at the beginning of every meeting that's not just a little single team meeting, there's a client story. So we talk about, I actually stole that idea. I'm sure some of you do it, but I stole it from a nonprofit I'm on that has a mission moment at the beginning of every board meeting where someone who actually works with the constituents of the nonprofit talks about an experience they've had since we're on the board and we're sort of removed. And I do that at Altair really regularly, like client stories, how the internal team's work affected our clients. Let's see. I think, I don't know specifically in your list where this one fits, but obviously we're all doing a big work from home experiment right now, just like many of you. But before this, I let people work where they wanted to work in many cases. So I think recognizing sort of the optionality, I know Paul was on the session I was on this morning, that's like my new favorite word, the optionality of where people want to work and how they want to work, I think is really empowering.
Great. Thanks, Becca. And that was the theme of our conference, was flexibility. And I think that's going to be the new word in competing for talent in the future, is creating an environment of flexibility. Because, by the way, I have millennials that I've screwed up over their lifetime. So now they're back in the workforce. And guess what? They're not liking this whole work from home thing. They want to be in the office. And I think that's part of their flexibility, is they would actually like to go back to the office. One of them actually is in our industry because they miss that contact, that social aspect of it. So it's not just assuming that work from home is the panacea, because it's not.
Right,
it's flexibility.
Right. And I get a little worried at this kind of conference, the last few I've been to, even Focus, like where the older firm leadership is all of a sudden like, oh, we don't need space, we can save money, I can work remote, and now I have a new life that I never had because I was working till 10 p.m. and had this big commute. And I get a little worried they're sort of going to force that on everyone, which I think is actually just as harmful as forcing everyone into an office.
Absolutely.
Like either
Absolutely.
extreme is a little too much. Like there needs
Right.
to be a choice.
Well, and I'll just give you one dirty little secret. By the way, there was a study done by one of our partnering firms about space as a reaction to this whole thing. And, oh, we're not going to need as much space. Well, not necessarily, by the way, because most of your space is only 65% occupied on any given day anyway, with travel and so forth. So um, that's not necessarily going to be a big savings for most firms, but flexibility will attract talent and retain talent. So we want to be thinking about that in terms of, we'll break out here in a couple minutes in terms of what really matters to your firm in getting talent to stick around and to perform. And so
Okay,
here's
Keith.
some, yeah, go ahead, Jim.
And I want to give a shout out to the comment that most of you should see in your chat. Absolutely true about millennials. First people who came back in my office. Well said, Becca. This makes it really fun if we're having sort of this sidebar in the chat room, and we'll send you that so that, you know, if there's some neat comments that are captured, you'll get those after the presentation. So please do that. And also, you know, in that reactions bar at the bottom right, you can do what I'm about to do, and that is, if you hear something and you say, yeah, right on, that resonates with me, put up, or Lisa just put up the celebration. That's cool. You know, I wish we could pass out martinis at this point, but, you know, virtual. So put up a little sign, you know, and let us know you're on board.
By the way, great demonstration, Jim, of one of the ways you create engagement is to have fun. And in a virtual environment, it's a little bit more challenging. I do think that for many organizations, the virtual cocktail hour sort of run its course. You know, we're creating this world of heavy drinkers, I guess. So there are other ways that you can actually create fun. And that's certainly something that we would always encourage in a virtual environment. You do as much as you possibly can, because what's the cost of not doing it? So let's take a look at these statistics. And this was pre-COVID, right? So this was pre everybody going into the bunker. And it's a little bit mind-blowing when you think about 50% of employees are hoping to leave their job. And this was a survey done by Gallup. And you think, wow, so every other employee I walk past is thinking about leaving. Yikes, that's a bit of a disturbing statistic. Now, I'm not suggesting that's what's going on in your organization, but it only gets heightened when we don't have the socialization required that people really want. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, we've got our introverts, and our introverts are loving this. And the answer is yes, they did for the first 3 months. As this thing has gone on and on and on, introverts are finding they need the socialization as well. Maybe not as much, but they would like a little bit more socialization. So part of it is the strategy of how do we keep this 50% that maybe wants to leave, first of all, from picking up the phone at all, and second of all, staying in the organization, because the costs are staggering. And if you think about replacing, and you start to think about some of the salaries and some of the total compensation in this industry in particular, this is not an insignificant cost. This costs us a lot of money. And if it's a client-facing individual, it can cost us a lot of business. So that 50% is something we want to pay attention to. And Jim and I will give you some insight into what are some ways to do that. But I'll tell you what's worse. What's worse isn't people quitting and leaving. What's worse is people quitting and staying, because they become a cancer in your organization. They slow you down. They create what we call sludge in the organization through bad behavior. And you might think, well, virtual solves that because they're not wandering around griping all the time. The phone works well as well. You can gripe over the phone. You can gripe over Skype. It doesn't really matter. Somebody who's negative is still going to be negative regardless. So we want to avoid this cost of quitting and leaving, and we want to really avoid the cost of quitting and staying, because it really hurts the environment. Jim, I noticed some chats popping up. I don't have my chat box open. Anything that we want to address?
Well, just, you know, what Simon and I had a little exchange here. You know, he said, not true with our young people. They've been advocating work from home for years. So it's dangerous to extrapolate just from our own personal experience, which is true. Keith and I have been on the phone with literally hundreds of staff members of an investment organization in this week. And in my experience, I don't know about yours, Keith, but mine, it's all over the continuum from,
yes,
oh, I can't wait to get back, to I never want to go back, to I want 3 days home, 2 days at the office. So I agree. Well, we've seen it's all over the map.
And that's why I go back to something Becca said, which I think is important. It really means you got to get those frontline managers involved to understand what is it people really want and what is it the
Yeah.
organization can do and respond to.
Right. And not make assumptions.
Absolutely.
Right.
Don't make
Because
assumptions.
I totally agree. It depends on the person and their life and their commute and, some complicated matrix of factors. But I do think it's interesting. Altair, my firm in Chicago, has a lot of clients who were partners of Accenture when it went public. So they're very wealthy now. And a very famous study from like 14 years ago about how people should work best, not what they wanted, but how they were the most productive was 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. And now all of those people, they keep bringing it up. I've been emailed that study like 20 times by these guys. They're like, see, we told you.
Yep.
So I just thought that's interesting. Some balance maybe.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. So it really does start with you as a leader in your organization. So I'm curious, Jim, toss up our poll if you would. What about you? Are you highly engaged in your current role? Go ahead and weigh in if you will. This is all anonymous, so certainly be candid with us. We would appreciate that. And maybe we should have added this. I'm highly engaged in my current role under the current circumstances, because I think some of us are, and some of us would say, gee, I hate to admit this, but Jim and I travel probably 75% of the time. I don't miss airport delays, but I do miss the travel. I miss being with my clients. I miss being with our clients and chatting about certain things. So we've got 29 of 38 have weighed in. So
some of you won't be able to vote because you chose the web option to join, and you actually have to download Zoom and use the app to be able to vote. So I'll assume that that's the case for some of you that you can't vote. So let's take a look at the 29 who did. So there you go, Keith.
So this is awesome. I'm glad. I will say I'm glad that we have such a high propensity of engagement. If some of you are in the somewhat agree, then the question is, well, okay, what's going on there? Because if you're all leaders in the organization, it is infectious. If you're engaged, then you can inspire others. And that's probably the first thing. Is it does really start kind of at the top of the house, right? That we can start to get people engaged. So certainly, Bill's got somebody he's getting engaged in the conversation. So that's awesome. By the way, thanks, Bill, for demonstrating. That is another benefit to Zoom. We were actually in a leadership meeting last week, and one of the leaders' daughters came up and gave her a hug and a kiss. And it was so cool to see, this person in that home environment, because it humanizes us. And sometimes at work, hate to say it, as leaders, sometimes we're not necessarily humanized. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to break you out now to have a little bit of a discussion for about 10 minutes about in the current environment that we're in. How are you getting people engaged in your firm? Becca gave us a few bits for her firm, but how are you? Share some best practices, share some great ideas about how you're getting people engaged. So Jim is going to send us off into the hinterlands, and then
what you found in terms of engagement at your firm in these unusual times. So who's got a thought or a comment? You can jump in, you can raise a hand, you can raise a virtual hand, you can jump up and down. Let me ask Linda, because we've had, she's probably getting tired of looking at me. We saw each other earlier this week. Linda, what are you doing there at CB to get engagement?
We're having weekly calls with all of our staff. So we use Zoom to do the calls. And, basically it's just a firm-wide update of what's going on, what people are working on. And then at the end of each call, we are trying to get more involved in people's personal lives. So what did you do for the weekend? Anything exciting happened, sharing birthday party pictures and stuff like that, which is always nice. A good way to end the conversation, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And it looks like you're back in the office, or are you still at home?
Yeah, I'm still in the office.
Okay. All right. And how many are in the office these days?
We have about 10 to 12.
Okay. All right. So some people are coming back in. Who else has a comment or a thought? I see Casey King. Greetings, the Kings. Tone set from the top. Say a little bit more about that.
Sure, Jim. Thank you. Let me share. Boston Financial Management, and I know a number of people on the call. Scott, your ears would be burning. We cited the RM Payson 3-mile walk with you and Jeff, and that was a very cool thing. Scott's in Portland, Maine, and they divided up all their 62 employees between the two of them and took them each for a 3-mile walk, which I think is a great thing. Internally, when I said tone set from the top, we've had a number of groups join us, and the tone has changed, and there's some things we work on. But what I meant was, sorry, Linda, you just mentioned all company Zooms to the point that sometimes people get weary. But I'd say they don't get weary if the tone is right. If you have people who trust each other and want to contribute. But we had a hangover from an old tone of every group meeting, whoever was running it would start off with, well, I know you all have a lot to do and this is your umpteenth meeting, Zoom call, whatever, so I'm going to be quick. And please don't say anything till questions at the end. And then someone who was really nervy would answer a question and it would get dismissed as, well, you didn't ask me that ahead of time. I wasn't able to prepare, or just outright rebuffed. This may sound obvious to all of you, but with that kind of attitude, it's a conversation killer. So the senior managers realized, oh, we're supposed to listen and have engagement and have these Zooms with everyone on it. So let's open it up for discussion. Any comments? And literally you could hear the crickets.
Yeah.
And I gently tried to point from the side, look, Jim, you can do that, but you've either got to have some strong personalities, or before the meeting, call on a few people and kind of prime the pump or seed the conversation. Casey, I'm going to call on you.
Casey, I think that's such a good thing. And I noticed that happening in my firm, and I had the managers do a communication training with a firm about running virtual meetings and how to engage people, how to ask them questions like, what's your first reaction to what we just covered? Right? Like very specific. And so it's not just opening it up, it's and calling on people. Like you're way more the MC of the meeting than you would be maybe in a room where body language and sort of pace comes more naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. And we found that by trial and error, that the method we're using now, where we try to set a very conversational tone, try to call on people, draw them in, because you're absolutely right, Casey, that the crickets are just all over the place when you say something like, okay, who's got a comment? We usually start with that way in case someone does have a blurt ready, but most of the time you don't get much. So we just call on people, like my good friend Mason down there from the great city of Dallas-Fort Worth. How are you doing? Give me a comment on engagement at the King Company.
Jim, can you hear me?
Yeah, just fine, Mason.
Okay. Yeah, I was telling Casey before, I mean, it's been challenging, but we've one thing that we have found is that on all of our investment meetings that we have, at least once a week, we have had better attendance, because as opposed to people that are just at conferences or visiting companies or the like, we actually have almost a full slate of all of our investment professionals now in that meeting, which we didn't have before. And so then we've leveraged that into really calling more people out. And we've also upgraded the platform. We were using an old WebEx platform that most people just dialed into. And so now we're starting to, leverage, better technologies and an inflection on adoption to get, better online resources and virtual meetings so that we can actually engage better. Yeah. That'd be one. Unfortunately, and I was telling this to Casey, the circumstances took away some of our engagements that we used to have, obviously, but I mean, outside of the office. And the case in point there was actually that we do a couple of retreats normally, and we had to scrap those. And so what I've kind of independently pivoted a little bit, and I've just taken some of the investments team out, on my own. And we've just gone out for, a small group, periodically, and usually, being Texas, we'll go out to the country and spend an evening or something like that. Just kind of relaxing and conversing. Yeah. Other than that, and we have a lot of people in the office. So, I mean, we've been allowed to keep about 25% of our staff here.
Okay.
A lot of them prefer to be here, which may be
Yeah.
unique. And, you know, now we're still running at 25, even though we've been okayed by the governor to move up to about 75.
Wow.
But we're keeping it 25 out of an abundance of caution. But the challenge around that is we actually have to turn people away.
Yeah.
And so we have to now have a preset schedule and a rotation of staff. That's probably a good thing, because that means that everybody does want to be engaged.
Yeah.
And present. So that may be unique from what I'm hearing about some of the preferences by some staff to actually have a more flexible work schedule.
Yeah. Thank you, Mason. I'm looking at the time. We should probably push on here. Keith, if you want to advance us and take a look at some of the material that we've found is useful about engagement. We like to think of engagement with our clients, and what we found over time is that there's been an evolution of motivators. Dan Pink wrote about this in his book Drive, and the CFA Institute did a lot of research on this as well and wrote a paper called FI, the Motivator in Investment World. And we've moved from extrinsic, which were a little bit more obvious, like if I give people more money, they will be happy and they'll work harder and that sort of thing. So I'm going to motivate them with money. I'm going to motivate them with status. You get the corner office, you get a big title, that sort of thing. Emotional pressures is kind of a fancy way to say your boss is breathing down your neck and pushing you to get things done. It could also be appreciation, but we just don't see that much of it in the investment world. But that could be an emotional lift coming from the outside. And then, of course, winning in competition. Now, none of these is bad. We're not saying that extrinsic are bad. They're just sort of what used to be the main levers. Now what we're seeing is intrinsic, and this is very different. This is about what's sort of inside of you. It's your, we have a little picture of the woman reaching up for the heart there. It's kind of what touches you. Purpose, you know, my heartfelt desire to do such and such could be purpose. Autonomy, in the results only world, it just means do the work, get it done any way you want to. And that can be very motivating. Mastery, the ability to continually get better and better. And genius, do what you love, do where you have passion. So let's explore these one at a time. We'll give you a little data here to show that these actually matter. So with 312 investment professionals, we ran a little study and we showed that the number one motivator for investment professionals was autonomy. And that's what's keeping a lot of people motivated in this virtual world, is they love the fact they can do things the way they want to, because there is nobody breathing down their neck. So they get to plan out how to do things. That is a big motivator. Passion for the work. So that's the genius, as we call it, factor. We'll look at that in a minute. Purpose and meaning, right up there with passion for the work. Now you see money, bonuses. So that's understandable, and particularly that's age dependent quite often. When people are younger and they're assuming debt and they've got school debt to pay off and whatnot, they need the money. So that's high in their list, and that's appropriate. People get a little older, they've got some savings, they got a good career, they're making much more money. It's not as important. So continuous improvement comes next, and then you see the other three extrinsic motivators are not as strong. So let's talk about these, break them down, and get a little bit more of a sense of each one. For the purpose is an intrinsic motivator. So what we'd like to do is put up a poll here and let you think about these different purpose factors. So I'll put that one up, firm purpose. My firm's purpose statement, and you can choose as many of these as you'd like, is motivating. Maybe it also serves a greater good. Maybe it also aligns with your personal purpose, so you can pick all these. It will attract talent. It's going to help us retain talent. It doesn't really exist. I mean, we may have something written on paper, but we don't really have a formal one. If you asked a bunch of us in the elevator, we'd all say something different, so there's no real agreement on it. It's uninspiring. Gets the this new term, meh. It doesn't do much for me. So which ones of those would you pick for your organization? Got 24 of you weighing in. We got 36 of you on these in the session with us. Okay, we're up to, again, some of you may not be able to vote, so I'm going to assume that's the case and stop at 29, which is great. So we'll end the polling and show you the results. So the biggest vote getter was serves a greater good. Now that, for both me and Keith, that sort of warms the cockles of our heart, because we're in the business of creating great places to work so that they can do good things in the world. You know, we are believers in the do good and do well. So is motivating. About half of you have weighed in and said, yep, it's a motivating statement. A lot of you say it aligns with your personal purpose. Interesting to me, not a big response on attracting or retaining talent. And then a fifth of you say, we don't really have one. It's not, you know, again, our firm is all about creating great places to work. And Keith and I and our 8 colleagues, we are passionate about that. So to me, it would be, you know, the opposite of does not exist. It exists right out there, and we've experienced it in very positive ways. And then is uninspiring. So that to me suggests you have it, but it's not really that inspiring. We just sort of have one. So to me, this is a very interesting result. And let's spend a minute kind of unpacking this result. So either chat in something, or I'll give each of you, or not each of you, but I'll give some of you a chance to just comment. But before I do that, let's have the crickets first, and then we'll go ahead and call on people. So it looks like Carolyn, you're just dying to say something there. Is that true?
Sorry about that. I couldn't find my mute button.
What about purpose? Tell me something about your organization.
Well, I answered that it's kind of hard. It was a hard choice for me, but I answered that we retain talent.
Uh-huh.
Our purpose, you know, is stated, it's really just about providing the best service we can for our clients.
And tell me again the kind of organization you're with, Carolyn.
Oh, sure. Investment firm, and we're about 70% institutional, 30% wealth management. So we're more
okay.
of a hybrid.
Okay.
So I think that can go either way. I think that can attract talent, retain talent, but I think everyone that works there, that everyone's most common push is our clients come first.
Okay.
Right? Everyone seems to, especially on the investment teams, I'm not on the investment team, but loves what they do, right? So
yeah.
I think that's so important, because if you don't love what you do and you're in this world, how can you help your clients achieve better?
For sure.
So, you know, that's kind of, you know, it's not this like hugely motivating purpose that we outwardly state, but I do think it is motivating in the sense that we're all trying to help our clients.
Sure, makes sense. Let's hear from somebody who really gets fired up around this, because some of you said it's motivating, it serves a greater good, it aligns with my personal purpose. So surely some of you have some energy for this. You're happy about the purpose. You really believe in it. So let's hear from one of you.
Yeah, Jim, this is Scott Drager.
Oh, hi, Scott.
Hi, I'm president of RM Davis in Portland, Maine. Casey, thank you for the shout out. So our organization is about 60 employees who serve primarily families and separately managed accounts with a big focus on wealth management. But jumping to the point of this exercise, I think we find our purpose statement is motivating in that we try to be always serving and leading in ways that inspires our workforce, our clients, and our community. And trying to inspire others through servant leadership has been a big something that's really been embraced within our culture, and I think means a lot to people. And especially when we emphasize that our employees we actually stopped saying clients first. We started saying employees and clients on par with each other, and being truly servant leaders where we really care about the experience of our employees as much as we care about the experience of our clients. And we found that that's something that our workforce has really appreciated.
Yeah. Boy, it's interesting, Scott, that you had mentioned servant leadership. We're working with several firms right now that really adopt that practice. And I don't mean the word, I mean the Greenleaf, writings about servant leadership, and the institute that teaches it, and if you think about that versus 20, 30 years ago, it's really quite a change in the mindset of investment organizations, that the leaders would be servant leaders. I still remember a PM not too long ago saying to me, I was talking about him and his team, and he said, "Don't these people get it? They're just here to serve me." They're just here to do what I need them to do. And I thought, well, okay, I don't know if that's too motivating. So I think this is fascinating, but we got to move on to other stuff. So Keith, if you can move us along, that'd be great. So the autonomy, remember that was the number one factor. We partner with Callie Ressler and Jody Thompson, and they are a trip. If you can, do some work with them. I mean, just the title of their book tells you everything, right? Why work sucks and how to fix it. So these are the two ladies that were at Best Buy, and they were told, let's get some engagement. Let's get some motivation going at Best Buy. And they said, well, the way to do that is to give people autonomy. And it went all the way to these things you see on the left here, that flexibility really does matter. And work is something you do, not a place you go. So that's what we're experiencing now in this virtual world. And a lot of people love it. Now, other people would like to get back occasionally, but that doesn't go against what they call ROWE, results-only work environment. People think results-only work environment means work from home. It doesn't. It means work in the best way you can to get the most done. If that means at the office, by all means, go to the office. If it means stay home, stay home. If it means go to McDonald's or Starbucks, go there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, yeah, go ahead, Becca.
And I was going to say the other part of it isn't just about the physical work. It's about a total mindset shift of managing for the outcome you want versus managing the human.
Yes.
In their time. Like you're managing for their results, not how they get to the results.
Yeah.
When.
And I think this whole concept folds pretty neatly under the value of respect. So if you say we respect people, well, then let them do the work the way they want to do the work. But you notice the bottom on the left, no results, no job, right? So it's not all of a sudden like this, oh, this
right.
sounds...
Again, it's not as personal, I think, when you're have to part ways, because it's about the results. It's not about the person. It's not personal.
It's right. By the way, I just want to give a high five to Becca. As far as any manager I know, she's CEO at Altair. She is the best at giving direct feedback, and it works.
Yes, my kids really appreciate it.
Right. I don't know about your kids. I just know about your employees. You are so caring that you can like club them and they leave the office. It's like the Irish, they can tell you you're going to hell and you're excited about the trip. Becca can really give tough feedback, but they walk out thinking she's a great boss. I'm glad she's my boss. So anyway, so autonomy. This is the extreme form. We work with firms that are doing this. Becca said they're in a form of this. We're seeing it now in the pandemic. All right.
Well, and
next slide.
I was gonna
Sorry.
say my other idea, it didn't really fit into the topic yet, but the other way I get engagement with that team of managers that report to me, there's 8 of them, is I have a book club with each of them.
Oh, nice.
So we all read this book together, me and each of them.
This book sucks?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we read, and I let them pick one that's relevant to them or they've heard of. We sort of trade off.
Yeah.
And it's part of our conversation every time we get together. And some people it takes a while. Some people, we read it together in a month. But I just do it with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Keith, you want to toss anything in, or are we good?
No, let's move on to
Jim?
mastery.
Jim,
Okay. Yeah.
somebody's got
Another
one.
comment.
Yeah, it's Casey. I had a quick comment. I agree with all of those factors, but what about teamwork?
Yes.
Is
Good.
that too old school? Or, I'm not being critical, but I read these and say, you could have a really great golf team here, but you might not have a good 8-man crew.
Exactly. So you need to realize that Roe is not saying work from home. It's not saying you can't meet with your team members. It's saying get together with your team and decide what's going to be most effective.
Yeah.
And so if you are indeed, a basketball team, you better get together and practice the plays and get to know the other person's moves and all that, because you're not going to be very good if you stay at home and shoot baskets in your driveway, right?
So so
go
Jim,
ahead.
can I jump on that one?
Please,
because
please.
I think the point is really strong. This is all about getting the job done. And if part of the job is you need to work together as a team, then by all means, you should have certain ground rules about when the team needs to get together. For example, I'm working with a portfolio management team, so portfolio manager and analysts, and they basically have designated 2 days a week. Now, not right now, but they will when they come back, and they've done this in the past, 2 days a week where people are expected to be in the office for collective meetings around looking at ideas and looking at the portfolio and that sort of a thing. That's part of the job. That's part of the result, rather than the other way around, saying, well, this is required because we need face time. It's not really about face time. It's about getting the job done, which means you need the collective, in some cases, to be together to get the job done.
Yeah. Great question. Thanks, Casey, because that's one that people get hung up on, is we need to be together. Well, you can be together. Okay, so let's move on to mastery. Remember, we're looking at purpose, autonomy, mastery. These are all these internal factors that are different from what's outside of me. Money's outside of me, a big office is outside of me, those sorts of things. This is what's in here. So you'll notice if we go back to the Gallup 12, and again, Gallup 12 has been researched with literally millions of people around the world. So it's a pretty powerful tool, these 12 factors that really get at engagement. And you look at 3 of them that are boxed, and these 3 are all about developing, getting better at stuff. That turns people on, progressing. All of us are knowledge workers on this Zoom session. And we all know that it's kind of cool to learn new stuff, to get new skills, to progress. That feels really good. So someone encourages my development. We have opportunities to learn and grow, and we're able to do what we do best, which is where we're going to go next. And that's what we call genius. So let's take a look at that. This is a really big engagement factor. It's my belief that every one of us was blessed with certain gifts. We just naturally are good at something. And the clue to what it is that you enjoy it. It really gets your blood going when you're doing that particular thing. The time passes. It's like fun. You start it right after breakfast. The next thing you know, you've blown through lunch and you haven't even thought about it. You've just been working away and enjoying it. So you look at these 4 quadrants, and they're important to the way you think about your work. Some things we're terrible at, and so we shouldn't spend any time doing them, because somebody else can do them much better and will enjoy it. Some things we're competent at, but the energy goes down. I suppose I'm competent at doing like a tax return, but boy, I don't want to do it. But I
You better ask our accountant that one, Jim.
Yeah. Oh, he would say I'm incompetent at that. But I could probably struggle through it, but it would not be an energy gainer. Then you move up to excellent. And this is where you get feedback saying you're good at stuff, you know, attaboy, attagirl, you know, great job. People tell you you're good at it. And it'll be an energy gainer. But then, even beyond that, there are things that they just light us up. And we call those genius, that it's our highest and best use. It's not just an energy gainer, it's like an explosion of energy. I just love doing this. You know, people who love to meet with the clients. When they've got a client meeting coming, they're just juiced for it. You know, other people are just juiced to go find a new investment idea. So what is it? And when we talk about this genius, we like to put up the next slide, which is, this is also from Gallup. It's their strength finders. And if you've not done strength finders, I think it's $25 or something. You go online and you Google strength finders. It's pretty useful. They give you a whole bunch of questions, and then they come out with what are your 5 strengths. So you see at the bottom there, all those choices. So I just looked at mine from the other day, and I did it several years ago, but I think it's accurate. It said ideation, so I have an active mind that comes up with a lot of different ideas. Intellection, which is related, I won't bore you with all the details, but intellection, and then strategic. So I had 3 that were in the strategic thinking. I had 2 in relationship building. I had empathy, and I had connectedness, empathy and connectedness, which is why I really enjoy this, because I feel like this is connectedness, you know, and I would hope I can do a decent job of hosting something like this, because it matters to me. I really like it. I didn't have anything in executing or influencing. I mean, I didn't have anything that was high up. I mean, I got scored on them, but they were pretty far down. So you don't want me, and Keith's going to attest to this, you don't want me being the executor. Like, Jim, we got to get this done. We're passing the baton to you. Like the baton will fall on the ground and bounce a few times. So, Keith, who do we have on the team that can execute?
Some of you know Liz. Liz is our executor. She really gets things done. I have no idea how she keeps so many balls in the air. But that's the whole idea of a high engagement team, is we have complementary skills and genius areas. So Jim doesn't have to worry about it. And when it comes to strategy and ideation, we have Jim, we have Jason. I enjoy doing that. And that gives us energy. So there's all sorts of ways to keep people engaged, because you put them in the lane that they were designed to swim in.
Yep. So this is just, I think this is useful, because people, when we ask them, what's your genius, they say problem solving. I mean, almost everybody says that. And that's true, but there's a lot of ways you can solve problems. I mean, everybody in our team would probably say problem solver, but like Keith said, Liz is solving problems in that first column, and I may be solving them in the 4th column. And then we've got a couple people like Jamie who are probably solving them in the 3rd column, you know? So this, I think, is a useful chart to look at and just sort of start to think about which of these is really a genius quality for me, where I was just born to do this. It's like falling off a log. It's no problem. You know, I love a blank sheet of paper. Other people get paralyzed by that. To me, give me a blank sheet of paper and a topic, and I'm happy to dive in and start writing. You know, I don't get writer's block. I just start writing stuff, and I love it. Other people, they would hate it. So it's just fun to look at this and say, so what would be my genius areas? And again, Google strength finders, take it, see what it says. Okay, so let's go to this poll, and I want to ask you, energy gainers versus drainers. What % of a typical month do you spend in those activities that get you energy, that energize you, that motivate you, that make you feel, yeah, I'm looking forward to that? You know, and it's really that simple. If you have a meeting on your calendar at 5 p.m. tonight and you think, it's going to be an energy drainer, I don't want to go to that meeting, I don't even want to be part, that's a drainer. Do you have another one that's like, oh boy, I can't wait to get to that meeting, it's going to be exciting, it's going to be interesting, or I can't wait to go do that analysis, or I can't wait to plan this presentation? Those are energy gainers. So just take a shot at how much time, what percent of a typical month do you spend in those gainers? And
We
so
have a vote on that one, Jim?
yeah, let me put that up. And here you go. Now you can weigh in. Time in your genius. So percent of a typical month do you spend in your energy gainers? We think this is such an important and valuable exercise. A couple more weigh in. I got to tell you, the results of this one are really interesting. So I'll give you a 3 count, 3 and 2 and 1. Boom. So check this out, people. I mean, it's like almost like a flat line across all the different scores. So you've got one person that says, I'm just very rarely in my energy gainers. Now, personally, all these lower scores make me sad because the older I get, the more I wish for everyone, my 2 daughters included, can do stuff that they love. You know, my oldest daughter is a dancer at NYU, and she absolutely loves that. And it just warms up my heart that she gets to do what she loves every day. And then you get some in the middle, 40, 50%. Now we get to the people who are up near the top. In other words, almost 100%. So can I just ask, who's almost 100%? Who's that person?
That was me, Bill.
Oh, Bill, great. So speak to that, you lucky guy.
Well, I got into the business because I thought I would like it. I've loved it. I've worked for the company I'm with now for 32 years.
And your role, Bill? Tell us your role.
Well, I was CEO for about 10 years. Now I'm a managing principal. We sort of changed our titles, but 1 foot out the door.
Okay.
And that may color my answer here, because I can kind of do what I want to do. And so with that sort of mission, I'd have to say close to 100%.
Oh, now you're warming up my heart. I love to hear that, you know, and that's my wish for everybody, that they'd all be like almost 100%. Now we aim for 80, and our rationale is find a way to get 80% of your time in stuff you really like to do that is an energy gainer. And then there's 20%. I mean, we're realistic, right? There's 20% that's not going to be as exciting and as fun. You may have to return some emails that, you know, it's not that great, but it's okay. But, you know, when Liz came into the organization, she's a full partner now. She came in as my assistant. And I said, your job description is to take everything off my desk that I don't want to do, that's an energy drainer. So that's what I'm talking about. You know, design it so that you are able to do what you love to do. Comments, thoughts about energy gainers and drainers? Okay,
I think of it as like there's so much less friction when you're doing your things that are your energy gainer. It's not that you can't do the other things, or that if you use a lot of energy you can't. It's just that there's so much less friction when you get in that realm.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe Jim, you can't, but other people can.
Right.
Whenever I counsel people and coach people on this, I always say, usually genius is the battle of the ego and of desire. And desire is your genius, and ego is what you think you should be doing. I think I should be a CEO. I think I should be a CIO. Had a client call this morning, and they were talking about their CEO, and he's a reluctant CEO. And of course, I scratched my head a little bit. I go, well, you're the CEO. You get to do whatever you want. And the reality is, he didn't want to be CEO. He wanted to run a portfolio. So it's that battle of ego. And I said, well, why don't you switch? Well, I kind of like the title of CEO, right? So it's a battle of ego and desire. And boy, I tell you, if ego wins, you're down in that, 30, 20, 10% or less range. And it can be challenging to stay motivated and stay engaged, to be sure.
Yeah, sure it can. A couple others of you have chatted in some fun comments, and I wish we could go to them, but I think in the interest of time, we better push on here, because we want to put you in a room now and let you talk about this whole concept of intrinsic motivators, which we abbreviate to MAP, mastery, autonomy, purpose, and then genius is another one, but mastery, autonomy, purpose. And so put you in rooms again for 10 minutes and just chat about how is that going at your organization? Are you hitting on some of those? Have you accentuated some of those, or is that something you need to do as you head into the future? So let's put you in some rooms. You can have a good discussion. By the way, there is a cocktail hour, virtual cocktail hour later this afternoon, so be sure and tune in for that. In the meantime, we're going to wrap up here with a few blurts on, we call them blurts, just thoughts top of mind about mastery, autonomy, purpose, or genius, these intrinsic motivators. So who had an interesting discussion about that in your group? This is where the crickets get to talk. Okay, cricket, cricket, cricket. And now I'll call on Rhonda. Are you going to share something with us, please?
Sure. I mean, it was a good conversation, ending up with some of the tools, the different tools that people are using, not just strength finders, but some other good tools were shared, things that we can use.
Is there one in particular that sounded promising?
Yeah, a LIFO, life orientations tool. Berkman was another one that was mentioned.
Sure.
To really help us kind of get a gauge on where people's genius lies and what they love to do. Yeah, but we had good discussion.
Yeah, and if you could chat those in, the people who know those tools, just chat them in for the rest of us so that we can put that on the chat, which we'll send to all of you. You'll get all the chatted comments in. And continue to do that. Continue to chat in your good thoughts. Let's just get a couple more opinions here. So, Kathy, do you have a thought about your group and kind of what they talked about?
Sure. We actually were focusing on that often the reality is you can only allocate a certain amount of time to your genius, because there's definitely some things in your role that you can't shift to someone else. And I find that we talked a little bit about, obviously you want to play to people's strengths, but there are going to be some things that come with the role that, don't use your genius.
Yeah, for sure.
We also talked about smaller firms where, you have to wear many hats, and so that came up in our discussion as well.
Yeah, that's the truth. And we coach a lot of people on how to get at least 70-80%, because you're right. Life will pull away all the stuff that you just love unless you're managing it. It's your role to manage that as best you can.
Well, and one idea that came up too in our discussion was that one person was very disciplined about, once a week, certain amount of time is on her genius. And it was something she would look forward to each week. I thought that was kind of interesting.
That's great. Yeah. Bill's with his genius right now. What's your genius name, Bill? We just lost Bill. The genius has taken over. So love to... Jeff, thank you. He's a beauty. Well, I wish we could go more. This gets my energy going, this whole sort of thing. So I love it. But I got to turn it over to Keith at this point and kind of land the plane on the deck of the ship. So it's all yours, Keith.
Great. So let's talk about one last concept that really pulls all of this together. And whenever we think about culture work at Focus, we really start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So many of you remember this from sociology or psychology years and years ago. Our friend Abraham Maslow put together this hierarchy of needs, And it really works well when you think about the culture in your organization. So if we go all the way back to extrinsic versus intrinsic, you'll notice that the extrinsic really rests at the lowest level of Maslow's hierarchy, right? So that's compensation. Those are the deficiency needs, the safety and security. Will I have enough money to pay the bills? Will I have enough money to send my kid to college, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll notice that the first three rungs on Maslow's hierarchy are what we call deficiency needs. There's a fear that comes out of it if in fact our culture isn't designed to meet those needs. So very first one around safety, security. Are we putting people in a safe place? Remember we talked about flexibility. So flexibility is all about safety. Some people feel safe coming into the office, others don't. If you happen to be in a big metropolitan city, we have somebody from Toronto, for example, or New York City or Boston, people don't feel safe actually traversing from home to the office. So safety and security is one of those things where flexibility can somewhat be the cure of that particular need. In addition to that, do people feel safe in the organization? And as leaders, here's how you can test organizational safety. How much feedback do you get in any given week from the team that works for you? Are they in your office giving you feedback once, twice, 3 times, 10 times a week? Or do you say, I have an open door policy, but nobody actually walks through the door? People who feel safe are willing to give feedback, both positive feedback, appreciation, as well as developmental feedback or gaps. And that's a sign of a safe culture. Belonging and connection. So that's all about how do we stay together? How do we keep the fabric of the organization tight? And so belonging and connection values and beliefs and behaviors are all about that. And again, that is an approval deficiency need. Does the organization want me here? Do they like me? Do I feel comfortable with my colleagues? Do we have safety such that we can actually say what we have to say as long as there's a blend of directness and empathy?
I'm off now. I was talking before. What does Caleb want to do about Riley?
Oh, hey, Mark, can you go on mute, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. So belonging and connection is yet another piece of that, right? Then we get into mastery and development, which we talked about as a huge attraction feature and retention feature. Well, what are we doing to take care of the whole person? What I really loved about my breakout group was we didn't talk about just developing skill like investment skill or client service skill or what have you. We talked about developing people in general, really caring for the whole individual, which actually gets at all 3 of those rungs. Right? So do my people feel safe to say what they have to say? How do we develop skills where they can, maybe they're too direct and they need a little more empathy. How do we develop that? That's going to help them both in their work life and their personal life, by the way. So as an organization, are we looking at mastery, not just in the context of what we're delivering to clients, but are we looking at mastery in the context of what we're delivering to our entire staff and them as a holistic person? So there were a lot of suggestions about that. Hopefully they made the chats and you'll see some of those ideas. By the way, Becca, can I be a voluntary member in the pumpkin carving contest you guys have coming up? I think that would be a lot of fun. That's belonging and connection, by the way. The last one is, as we talked about, purpose. Remember, mastery, autonomy, and purpose, which fit very nicely into this. Purpose is really sort of that, as Maslow talks about, that self-actualization need. Purpose and meaning is really all about spending as much time as you can in your genius. Doing something that you feel really matters to your family, to the people you love, to the society, to the team that you're with, whatever that purpose happens to be. If your culture has a strong mission and has a strong purpose, people will find themselves in that community and you will have high engagement, absolutely high engagement. You won't be able to blast them out of here no matter what you want. You'll also have a line at the door, which is kind of nice to have. You'll never need to call another recruiter again because it's infectious. Jim talked about a couple firms that we work with that have high purpose. They're very purpose-driven, servant leadership-driven. They have a line at the door of people who really would like to work for them. So talk about a way to keep and get talent. It's really incredible to watch, and it's fun to work with. So we think about Maslow when we screen cultures and we look at culture and we say, have they actually met those rungs on the Maslow's hierarchy? Have all of those things been attraction and retention features, engagement features, have all those things been addressed when they've created their firm, when they've grown their firm, and when they've built their firm? So any questions or thoughts about that? How about a blurt on Maslow as we wrap up here? Karen, what do you think? Maslow, good, Maslow, not so good. Does it sound like it makes sense to you?
It makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, all of the evidence is that people work best when they have purpose and a mission, and they feel good about what they're doing. And I think there've been a lot of great contributions today to show folks how to, including us here at the IAA, develop our colleagues to their fullest potential.
Wonderful. So, Eric, I'm just kind of curious, what's one thing that your firm does that addresses any one of these rungs on the hierarchy?
I think one thing that we started doing a few years ago, and you mentioned it earlier, is the Strengths Finder. Really taking a holistic view of our employees and using the Strengths Finder to figure out where people, where and who people work best with, because that's going to contribute to your point about safety, about security, and all that. If people are communicating the right way because they understand each other's strengths, you're going to have a much stronger organization with a greater purpose.
Terrific. That's a wonderful example of how you knit that fabric together. Well, we're right at the bottom of the hour. We have one more poll. We'd like a little feedback from you. What do you think? Would you recommend what Jim and I have covered today to your colleagues? And if so, wonderful. If not, we'd love to get some feedback if there's a disagree or slightly disagree or strongly disagree for that matter, because we thrive on feedback. It's what really gets us up in the morning and keeps us going and helps us improve our delivery to everybody in the investment community.